wait with bated breath.
It's the first time that I can remember we don't have anybody here.
I'll take it as good.
Yeah, okay.
I'm stating a fact.
I'm gaveling,
I'm
I'm
not
gaveling.
reading into anything, I'm just saying. All right.
Call to order, call to order, all right.
Make sure your mic's on.
Yep. So I am calling the Board of Adjustments meeting of October 21st, 2025 to order. We have a quorum. We are missing, is Market?
Board of Adjustment, right?
I did say Board of Adjustment. Oh, you're making me second doubt my mental health here. So we've got everyone except for Marcus.
Yes.
Okay. So if we could please adopt the agenda by making a motion.
Make a motion, we adopt the agenda for the Board of Adjustments meeting.
All in favor? So moved. Adoption of the previous minutes. There are previous minutes, but it was very short. So if we could get those moved and approved.
So moved.
All in favor? All right, so moved. And we do not have a case to hear tonight. So we're moving on to other business. So consider adoption of the 2026 Board of Adjustments meeting schedule.
So this is going to be the exact same schedule that you have for planning board since we do the meetings concurrently. We like to adopt these in October so that we have something on the books, just in case something were to happen, a meeting were to get canceled, and then we don't have a schedule in place for the next year. Of course, you can, as the year goes on, you can amend meeting schedules at any time as long as your proposed change is still 7 days out. So pretty self-explanatory. All the meeting dates are the third Tuesday of the month at 6 p.m.
All right, well, I'm going to make a motion to move to accept these minutes as proposed. Anyone have a
Second.
To adopt the meeting schedule.
adopt the meeting schedule, what he said?
Second.
Yes, all right, all in
I'm here.
favor? Here we go, yay. All right, now consider adoption of minutes from today's meeting.
I'm trying to close out this board for the year pretty much.
Got it.
Basically, your minutes are, you called the meeting to order, you guys adopted the agenda, you guys adopted the minutes. There were no cases, you adopted the meeting schedule with no changes, and you're considering these minutes, and then you'll adjourn shortly after, if you're good with that.
Would anyone like to make a motion to approve these minutes so as
spoken.
stated?
Yeah.
As stated.
Make a motion as we approve the meeting minutes as stated.
All in favor? All right, so moved, and we will adjourn. I'm going to make a motion to adjourn. Would anyone like to? Yeah, here we go. I'm making a motion to adjourn at, what time is it?
6:03.
6:03, fastest meeting of all time. And could I get all in favor? Aye. All right, so moved, and we're adjourned.
I can
Man.
confirm that is a record, by the way.
Yeah, sweet.
That's pretty good.
We set the
See you next week.
record.
See you next month. Oh.
So
Okay.
give Polly 1 second to switch over to planning board. You guys are faster than technology today.
Good one. Yeah. You've
That's
been
not
waiting to
really
use
hard
that,
to
right?
say
Yeah.
these
No,
days.
I have these
you know.
chopped away.
You've had that waiting.
Good to go. All right, so now,
She's got to check out.
Go ahead, sorry. You may regavel.
you may regavel. We'll just remember that one. All right, so now we are I'm still on the wrong page, sorry. I have to keep backing up. All right. Now I'm calling the planning board meeting of October 21st, 2025 to order. We have a quorum. We are missing Marcus Williams. And we do not have anyone on remote participation. So if I could get a motion to adopt the agenda. All right, all in favor? All right, so moved. So adoption of the previous minutes. Anyone have any questions, changes, comments? And if not, if I could get a motion to approve.
So moved.
All in favor? Okay. All right, so moved. We don't have anyone in the public gallery, so we will skip public comment period. And I don't believe we have any presentations. All right, or unfinished business. This is like Michael Lavelle's dream come true. All right, so new business. Pause, we do have work to do here. All right, Hunter.
Well, I'll take Austin's
basically the first item is for you guys to adopt your schedule for planning board, just as you guys just did for Board of Adjustment, but this is just mirrors that, but it's just specifically for planning board. So all we need is a motion, and we can move on to the next item.
I make a
Hunter's
motion
gonna
that
go.
I'm going to be out in March.
Okay.
Make a motion for that.
Is
Big
it somewhere
news.
fun?
Father?
Oh.
My wife's pregnant.
I was
I hope
like,
she
if I
doesn't
say
kill
this,
me
is
for
it-
saying that, but no,
Don't worry,
she,
nobody's watching.
no, she, no, she's expected in the 1st of March, so just for planning purposes, we're going to go ahead and move that joint meeting to February, because it will also be our joint meeting for the comprehensive plan and such, so we want to make sure we get that in before I'm out for a little bit.
Well, congratulations. That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
That's great.
Welcome to the club.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we adopt the 2026 meeting schedule as presented.
All right, all in favor? All right, so moved. Now, we get to our discussion of the text amendments to the Marvin Development Ordinance, starting with the Public Tree Ordinance and General Tree Regulations. I think you're doing all this at one time, right?
Yeah, so just, I know we've, over the last couple of meetings, kind of been talking about some text amendment staff have been researching and working on. This one kind of came to the forefront due to, we are in the process of trying to receive our Tree City USA accreditation. I think I mentioned that at a previous meeting. We received some initial feedback from our local coordinator with the North Carolina Forestry Service, sorry, kind of blank there, on our ordinance, and he provided some recommendations. He basically saying that our current word, the Arbor Day Foundation's focused on public trees and maintaining and planning on public spaces and such. We have a section of that, like in Article 11, but he basically recommended some areas to strengthen in that to make sure that we hopefully receive that accreditation when we apply later this year. Before I get into those proposed amendments, I do want to kind of go over a presentation on that Ptolemy and I, or mainly Ptolemy, has put together, kind of outlining what the village does from a tree standards in general. Because I know there's been a lot of questions either from planning board, and it's came up in PRNG and just in members of the public on our ordinances regarding tree protection.
On the Lorax, sorry.
So I want to go into this to kind of set the context, and then I'll get into the proposed amendments regarding the public tree section, and then we can kind of just further discuss, and then if we have time, we'll hit on those other two items that we've been discussing with gated subdivisions and accessory structure maximums. So, Ptolemy, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening. So this is going to be a really quick presentation. It's just going to go over our tree protection plan, what we're doing here at Marvin and surrounding areas in support of trees, and then areas and programs that we can enhance and improve on.
I get to be Vanna White today.
Okay, so let's start with the roots. The roots of the tree are what legislations that we have in place. So currently we have Chapter 93, which is trees, mostly focusing on development. And then we have Article 11, which is our landscape requirements and tree protection.
Yeah, and just to add on this is that Chapter 93, you went forward.
Oh, it's going back. Oh, it's going the wrong way.
Well, while he gets back to the main thing there. So Chapter 93 was established in our Code of Ordinances. It's still in place. It basically was our tree chapter that regulated tree protection on during development and private property regarding like tree removal permits and mitigation requirements. When we adopted the MDO, so one thing, Chapter 93 also then references still Articles 150 or Chapter 150 and 151 in the old ordinance. When we adopted the MDO replaced Chapters 150 and 151, but we didn't replace 93. And that was somewhat intentional because there's sections in there that we wanted to keep, but we're currently working on, and I'm working with Keith, the Union County Urban Forester, on getting those consistent with Article 11, as well as strengthening those the best that we can. The short end is that, legally speaking, when it comes to private property rights and tree regulations on it. It's a gray area with the state and with the state statutes. What's clearly defined is that we can regulate those protections when it comes to when development's triggered, meaning if you're pulling a zoning permit for a pool or you are purchasing property to build a subdivision, that is two different scales, but also it's all under the same umbrella as development. There's got to be a zoning permit that's pulled for the most part, and that's where then we can then tie any type of tree removal and stuff like that to the development part. If somebody were to come to me right now, and it's happened, hey, I want to remove 20 trees from my property because I want more lawn space. Technically, it's in Chapter 93 saying they have to get a tree removal permit, but with this way the state statutes read is we don't necessarily potentially have that authority. It's like I said, it's a gray area. So what Keith and I do is typically work with these property owners to try to figure out what their plans are, because most of the time it's got a long-term vision of, I want to build a pool in 6 months. Okay, can we wait till we pull the pool permit and get it all under the same umbrella? Sometimes it's just they, like I said, want more lawn space. So right now we've been working on, I know that's kind of high level, but I want to kind of make sure that expectation is kind of clear there. But we are working with Keith as well as potentially looking at some local state legislation to give us that authority, because the last time that was done was in 2006. So certain municipalities do have that enabling legislation from the state legislature, giving them that authority to regulate on private property. Like I said, the thing is it hasn't been done since 2006. Any questions on that?
I have questions, but it's more about canopy trees versus natural buffers, but I'll let her continue because maybe she's going to answer these questions through her presentation. If not, I'll bring it back up again.
Okay. So next slide. Yes.
Okay, so after the roots comes the trunk, and I like to think of the trunk as what are we growing towards? So what goals and priorities do we have when it comes to tree preservation? Mostly, it's obviously to promote tree preservation as much as we can and overall increase canopy in our area. Some of my favorite roads in Marvin are the ones where the trees are right above you, like the stretch right after Marvin Even Park on the way to Publix.
And just to add here, once again, with Chapter 93 and Article 11, if you look at the purpose and intent of both of those sections, they are both kind of share those same goals in protecting those tree canopies, allowing necessary hazard removals, and ensuring reforestation. But just as I mentioned, they are different on what triggers tree mitigation and so on. So we're trying to achieve these goals and purposes of those ordinances through clearer regulations ultimately, but also this presentation is going to get into further, like what else can we do? Like outside of legislation from the village's standpoint, from ordinances, what else can the community and or HOAs and so on potentially do to help further these goals of our village?
So next are the branches, which essentially is what outreach programs can we consider, and what programs do we have that we can enhance and improve upon? There's already quite a bit that the Village of Marvin does. For example, we have a partnership with Habitat Builders. We sponsor them, and there are many events that happen throughout Union County, but more specifically at Marvin Eford Park. Habitat Builders is the Western Union County division of the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. So they do a lot more than just trees, but these are some of the events that they have held in terms of trees and just planting around, such as their Arbor Day tree planting, which they do in correspondence with North Carolina State University. So Keith O'Haron has been a part of that as well. They've also done an invasive plant removal series. They have a mini tree farm. They recently in September did a tree walk in the park, and of course Habitat Heroes, which is a program that they have. If you want more information, you can check out habitatbuilders.com/Marvin Initiatives. And then reaching out further than just our local area, in the North Carolina Urban Forest Council is a great group that does a number of things. These are just 5 great programs that they have, such as urban site considerations, which is resources that we can use during development, the Green Infrastructure Alliance, which helps, it has tons of great publications available, the Legacy Tree Fund, which there are grants available through this. It's a program that helps urban and rural communities across North Carolina with their tree planting projects. The Urban NC Wood Group I thought was very interesting, because do you ever think about what happens to all the trees after they get cut down during development? This group actually takes some of that wood and uses it to make beautiful pieces of woodwork, which I think is great, like a way to conserve on it. And then, of course, for more information, they also have a host of tree board webinars, which are great conversational pieces, how to talk to more people in your community. They haven't done one of those in a while, but it looks like they're going to try to build some up next year. Next, please. And then we have the North Carolina Forest Service. This is going bigger into the state of North Carolina. They have a nursery tree improvement program, which they donate certain trees that can be used for planting, growing, selling, and distributing. And then the urban and community forestry, which offers technical and financial assistance to municipalities and community organizations. Essentially, there's a lot that we can do. Next, please. One local program that we have around here is called Treesilience. It is an initiative done by Trees Charlotte, and they're dedicated to advancing environmental justice through the lens of tree equity. One thing that Charlotte talks about a lot is how they have a tree canopy that averages around 47%. And they're a much bigger city with a lot more urban infrastructure than us. And they have found that in a lot of the subdivisions that have under 47%, they try to improve them through tree day planting, which just has volunteers from their local community getting involved. Next, please.
They're losing their canopy. They're losing a lot of their canopy.
They are.
With development.
Definitely. And then lastly, the leaves. Beyond branching grout, what legacy do we want to leave? Next slide. It gets
We had a whole slide for a pun.
Okay. So one that you've heard a lot about recently is Tree City USA. It's an annual recognition program designed to raise awareness of the value of community trees, set foundational standards for communities of all sizes, and celebrate community improvement. What's really nice about them is they help municipalities, both big and small, and because of their standards that they set out, there's a lot that we can do to become accredited. Next, please. Thank you. Okay. So these are the standards that we have to follow in order to qualify for accreditation. The first one is to have a tree board or department.
And yeah, I just want to add, just to focus on these two standards is the reason I want to do this presentation first is to kind of give you guys an overview of Tree City USA. And then when we get into the recommended proposed amendments, it's really kind of to clarify for us to achieve standard 1 and 2 with clearly defining, who's responsible with tree board / department, and as well as in, like I said, further defining that public tree care ordinance. So I just wanted to make sure you guys were aware with what the 4 standards are, but these are the 2 that are kind of going to be mainly tied with why we're proposing some amendments here after this presentation.
Yeah, so the first 2 standards are definitely more municipality oriented. So what can we do as both the planning board and other boards that we have here? Next slide, please.
So would our Union County tree guide not qualify for this? Like, does it have to be a local?
No, so he would, but that's the thing is, like in Chapter 93, we say like the village arborist, but we don't have a village arborist technically on staff. So it's really, that's why these proposed sections are going to be clarifying that language, like either the village manager or the planning and subdivision administrator, i.e. me, and or their designee, where then our designee would be, yes, Keith. And it gets into having a board or department responsible for maintaining, but at the same time as planning and recommending. And I want to make sure that's kind of clear, because when we get into the amendments, I'll explain that.
Does this also filter down to like HOAs and architectural review boards to make sure that when they're reviewing, somebody wants to add an addition or something like that, that
We're getting, yes,
take care of the trees that are there?
you're getting to where we are headed here in a second.
Okay.
That is a very good question.
Yes.
And then the last 2 standards are about how much we spend per capita on community tree care activities. This could include any events that we hold at Marvin Eford Park, how much we spend on trees in general on our public land, like in the parks, trails, and greenways, and maintenance of them, initial plantings and care, even tree removal, and, which we do meet.
What?
That we do meet standard 3.
Yes, we
As of
do.
right now.
We do between, once again, our contract with with Keith, the urban forester on top of, we have maintenance, we have a contract for tree maintenance here on Village Hall and the Marvin Eford Park. We also, our public works staff also does some routine maintenance on our trees. So we've added it all up. We meet that criteria. I've confirmed that with our local representative for Tree City. And same thing, then standard 4 is an Arbor Day observance and proclamation, which I'm gonna plug this in here now. We're celebrating Arbor Day this Saturday at the park from 1 to 3. It's our inaugural celebration. We'll be planting a tree. We received a donated tree from Trees Union. It's an oak. It's a swamp oak, white swamp oak, right? Yeah. So we're going to plant that in the park, do a little use as an educational opportunity. Christina Kolb with our PRNG board, as well as with with Habitat Builders, is going to do the ceremony or plant and use that, like I said, as an educational opportunity. And really, the goal of this is to celebrate trees, get the public out, try to educate them on how to plant a tree, the benefits of trees, and build on this moving forward and make this an annual event.
Yeah, so standard for the Arbor Day observance, we're doing this in partnership with Habitat Builders, with Trees Union, and the Arbor Day Foundation. It's going to be a great event, October 25th from 1 to 3 p.m. There's going to be some booths in the barn. Christina Kolb and Christina Traub from Habitat Builders is going to have a plant exchange. Even if you don't have plants to exchange, you can still pick some up. And then we'll be doing a tree planting ceremony. It's going to be very nice. You guys should all come.
Quick question for you. I've seen other municipalities, cities do tree giveaways. Is that something that eventually we may be able to get to?
That is definitely something we can consider, especially in partnership with Habitat Builders.
That's something that we would budget for and provide?
It's actually something we're
So one
working
thought that we
on.
had, yeah, so they're doing a plant exchange, and we do have like a mini tree farm at the park. With all that being said, like, one, growing a tree and then, properly digging them up and then having them transplanted, we don't necessarily have the skill to do that at the current time, but, getting saplings or still and from baby, is something we did actually discuss with Habitat Builders as part of, future Arbor Day celebrations for the village. So that's something that, yes, potentially in the future, and then that'll get into further HOAs and what they can do. I know I keep teasing it, but we'll get there in about 2 slides, I think.
Yes.
Great.
Can I just make a
Yeah.
side comment? I think a lot of times when you have a landscaper come in and you've built a house, they do all these plantings. Sometimes they're native, sometimes they're not. And then you have no idea, you don't remember after so many years what the heck is planted in your yard and how to take care of it. And so if there are any apps, I know that sometimes there are apps where you can take a picture and it'll tell you what it is. So that you can actually continue to maintain and take care of what's in your yard. So any kind of information like that would always be helpful.
We do, Keith has provided us some resources, and we potentially will hopefully try to get these on our website, but at any time, for any resident, listen, one, if you're in a subdivision, especially a newer one, we have the landscape plan, so we have an idea of what was planted. Obviously, there might have been some substitutions and stuff, but further that, we have residents sometimes ask us, or will shoot me an email about a tree, and that's where Keith comes in. He's the expert in this. I feel like I know enough to be dangerous, but he can look at a tree and tell you exactly what it is and what to do. So I will typically defer to him in that, but he's a great resource to have in those when that comes up. So once again, if you ever have questions or any of that, we'd be happy to at least try to point you in the right direction and get you to either coordinate with Keith or get you some printout or website material that can give you that information.
Or even giving tree removal services or arborists that, builders hire. a like Marvin seal of approval, so they understand our tree ordinances and abide by our tree ordinances. I don't know if that's something.
We can't endorse anybody.
We're a public entity.
So, not endorse them, but say they have read and understand our tree ordinances, you know what I mean? Like a certification.
Tomato, tomato.
Yeah, so that's somewhat, we'll get into some of these text amendments, but at the same, like, what the ordinance says now and like what we'll kind of further clarify is, yes, like they're supposed to be following, it's the, what is the ASNI 3000 tree planting standards, I think, and stuff like that. It's already outlined in our ordinance, but that's language. I mean, that's where, once again, Keith kind of comes in. From a development standpoint, like if a subdivision, when they're going through the construction plan process, they submit their tree removal plans along with their mitigation and landscape plans. Staff reviews that to, one, make sure it complies with the MDO in Chapter 93. Keith also reviews for that compliance, and Keith also provides recommendations on species. I also have started implementing, basically, if a developer wants to substitute, they need to clear that. I'm not going to say which subdivision because I don't want to throw it, but there was one subdivision that planted a different species that wasn't a part of the original approved plans because they couldn't get it, and we're making them plant those back, so I'm getting more trees, just because, you know, if they would clear it, because once again, it's fine to substitute in that thing, but at least get approval from us, because that's where, you know, Keith comes in and provides that information on like, hey, it could be native, it could be invasive, or, you know, based off of the climate and certain things, what's going to be successful planted there. And that's our goal in making sure during that review.
You know, I think that there's so much oversight over developments. I think there could be more issues with just individual people building homes because they don't realize what they can and can't do.
Yeah. And I do want to take this kind of conversation to make sure it's clear, like, once again, our ordinance doesn't say you can't develop a property because it's wooded. It says if it's wooded or, you know, there's certain size trees on it and in good condition, you could develop it, but there's also the mitigation that comes into that. You know, I feel like there's sometimes a misconception of like, if it's a fully wooded lot, it can't be developed because we have a very strict tree ordinance. We have a very strict tree ordinance, and once again, the goal is to preserve the tree canopy, but if it can't be preserved because of development, then to mitigate and enhance over time. So, in both Article 11 and Chapter 93 do achieve that, so.
Okay. And then lastly, we have some further outreach programs that we are doing here. So one of them that you'll be seeing coming soon is the Marvin Mayor's Monarch Pledge, which it really is. It's a lot of M's, hence the logo. And what it is, it's essentially a pledge that we take here to help rebuild the milkweed population, which is that plant that you see the butterfly on. And this is a very important plant to the monarch butterflies, who are actually just finished flying down south to Mexico. You can still probably see a couple going down there. And the reason is that these butterflies only lay their eggs on the milkweed plant because that's the only thing the caterpillars will eat. Because of development and climate change, there has been a rapid decline in the monarch population, which has then been a larger ecological impact. And so this is a small way that we can help rebuild that habitat for them. And then secondly, I just want to quickly talk about Trees Union, which is a great program that Keith and Habitat Builders have been working on. It's kind of like a Tree Charlotte that they have. And what they're doing through this is to bridge the gap in knowledge and resources around tree care and maintenance. So like you were saying about, you know, pamphlets or handouts about tree care, removal, all those kind of things. That's what Trees Union is working towards right now. And they recently partnered up with Habitat Builders. Keith, Christina Culp, and Bob Nunnenkamp recently held a meeting with all HOAs were invited. And recently, they all sat down to talk about how we can add trees to our HOA common spaces, and then other like public pieces of land to help and like increase our canopy, also help with the beautification of Marvin in itself. There's nothing negative about adding more trees to here. And then hopefully that will snowball into a bigger tree event where we can have tree saplings that we hand out or more tree care initiatives and things like that.
So in this now, what else, what can HOAs do? You know, one thing, as I kind of mentioned, like it's a gray area with what the village can enforce regarding private property and removal of trees to an extent. HOAs definitely have a lot more reaching authority. Obviously, it's got to be in your CCNRs. This could be an amendment, but some neighborhood CCNRs already read this, and then it comes to the HOA or the ARC on enforcing. Like, for example, Tullamore, so what, like, for example, Chapter 93 says you can remove a tree and you don't have to mitigate if it's dead. So every time that happens, I have them document it. I recommend that they plant it back, but I cannot legally force somebody to plant a tree back that's dead, diseased, or a threat to their structure. However, Tullamore in their CCNR states that every property must always maintain like 2 canopy trees in their front yard, 2 canopy trees in their rear yard type thing. And that's not verbatim, it's just some type of language like that. So there was a resident that tree died, they had it removed, and they planted one back. Obviously, it's a smaller tree, but once again, that goal was being met through the HOAs kind of enforcing that. So, you know, I've had conversations with certain HOA boards regarding like, hey, is there ways to potentially get in your guys' ARC process or in the HOA, like ensuring trees that are removed or either planted back, kind of giving that extra layer of enforcement. HOAs are great because they're sometimes my eyes and ears. The only way I hear if a tree is being removed is, for the most part, is when somebody calls. And, you know, most of the time, they do have a tree removal permit, but there is sometimes that they don't. There's not much you can do when the tree's taken down. So really kind of having it enforced in your CCNRs is one thing that really helps. On top of even, as Pauline was mentioning, partnering with HOAs to, you know, enhance maybe some of their common open space areas. One thing people like fail to realize is that there's certain subdivisions that have been built over the last 5 to 7 years that were farm fields, and there are now more trees on that property than there were before. And so that's where once again we're achieving that through our ordinance through development by, even though they didn't remove trees, we still have tree planting standards on how many trees have to be planted and buffer requirements. So it does force those trees to be planted there, but there's still some, the estates at Marvin Branch, for example, farmland, they planted trees back, but there's that 200-foot buffer between Marvin Branch and the development that is pretty much no trees. And they've asked me, how can we plant trees in there? I'm like, you guys can plant as many trees as you want. And so we talked with habitat builders and trying to use those opportunities to potentially work with those HOAs to educate them, but also get, you know, additional trees planted in their common open space. So.
You don't need a permit to plant a tree.
Nope.
I will say, when you do lose a tree, though, especially if it's a larger one, planting one back in its place can be hard, because you'd like to plant back where it was, but stump removal is so incredibly expensive that most of the time it's like you just cut it down and move on.
One thing during the HOA meeting that I learned that Keith shared with everybody is that when you do plant a tree, you want some of those roots close to the trunk to be visible. Instead of mounding it, what he calls a volcano mound, all the way on top, it's good to have some of those roots showing, the tree toes, as he calls it. Because if you don't, it essentially doesn't allow for the nutrients to go up from the roots to the tree, and it will suffocate, essentially. And if you look around in our subdivisions, we have a lot of volcanoes everywhere. So these are things that could be implemented more just for general knowledge for the people. And yeah, I'd just like to leave you with this one quote that I thought was really nice from Ralph Waldo Emerson: "The creation of 1,000 forests is in one acorn." Thank you, guys.
That's nuts. That's the name of our Christmas tree this year. This is nuts. Squirrel-themed books.
So with all that, like I said, I wanted to present, or, Ptolemy's worked on that, and we've been working on, once again, how do we strengthen our current ordinances for public and private property, as well as how can we educate? That's kind of one of the biggest things. And tonight, I want to get into some proposed changes, and this is mainly regarding public trees. Once again, so trees planted on public property owned or maintained by the village. I feel like there may be questions on, hey, what can we potentially do on private property or development-wise, and be happy to kind of discuss that further. But the short end is, I'm not asking for any recommendations tonight. I just got some of this feedback back from our local coordinator last week, so I've been drafting some amendments, so I'm going to be bringing you back the formal amendment for our, basically, our Tree City USA accreditation at the November meeting. I do want to just kind of high level go over it, maybe get some feedback. So in short, the current ordinances, Chapter 93 and Article 11, currently address the protection during development. It's been recommended by the North Carolina Forest Service to amend our ordinances to clearly establish that authority and standards for care and management for public trees. So we're recommending some amendments to Chapter 93 and when I say and/or, Articles 3, 4, and 11, 23 of the NDO. We could potentially make Chapter 93 our public tree ordinance and take all the stuff out of Chapter 93 development-wise and merge it / make sure it all fits with Article 11. So then you kind of have two separate things. That's what Keith has recommended, and that's kind of probably the route that we're going to go. So getting into any questions on that?
You've got here where it says shall have full authority to plant prune. Is that?
On
would that
public
be
property.
On public property, but should that be at the council reviewing that?
Yeah, so yeah, I'm going to,
Because, I mean, when I see full authority, it kind of means they can
Without
just
checks and balances.
willy-nilly.
yeah, so, and that's where we're going to get into. If you recall, we can have a department or an advisory board. We're actually going to kind of do both. So what's first being recommended is basically giving that authority to recommend tree plantings or maintenance or landscaping and stuff on public property to the PR&G board. They already do that. If you go back to, some of their previous meetings, with their conversations with the Village Hall Park, Village Hall property, they're already kind of doing that. So it's basically going to add that in, Title 3, Article 30, I think, of what establishes the Parks and Recreation Green Board, adding a bullet or two into what their duties and responsibilities are, and adding that clear language that they're the advisory. They also advise the village and direct staff on public tree maintenance or plantings and so on. They also will help then future plan and implement those goals of the Arbor Day Foundation, Tree City USA. So that's kind of step one. Then step two of that, we would clearly then identify staff to then carry out the routine maintenance, which gets, it's not me, sorry, which gets into then that second amendment on their page 2 under draft changes. So it's basically, and the reason I have this highlighted is because I'm going to get feedback from the local coordinator and Keith on either saying like the village manager or the planning and subdivision administrator or all the above, or their designee basically shall have full authority to plant prune. So they're basically, they're being directed to maintain and take care of the public trees. And that includes trees on Village Hall property, the park, street trees that are located within right-of-ways that the village maintains the roads. All that. Does that kind of a little clear?
Right-of-ways. How broad are the right-of-ways?
Say what?
What's picked up by rights-of-way? Like, how broad are they, and can they come on my property to?
So the right-of-way, some of the newer subdivisions have what's called a planting strip. So you have your road curb, about 6 to 8 feet of grass, sidewalk. The right-of-way ends at the back of sidewalk. I would have to look, it depends on each subdivision, but basically, like, if you drive, I'm trying to think of an example. I'm going to use the estates at Marvin Branch as another example. if you go into the estates at Marvin Branch, they have trees lining the left side of the subdivision. Those are all within the right-of-way. Those are public trees that the village will maintain long-term. And there's other subdivisions that kind of have similar. The way the old ordinance read is it defined street trees, but it was on private property. It was kind of, didn't make sense. But any trees that's like actually doesn't, I'm not saying overhangs, I'm saying if it's actually planted within the right-of-way, the village would maintain. And that would then, like I said, be the responsibility of staff and/or contracted, a contracted, tree care company to maintain those trees. Does that answer your question?
So if they're not maintaining the trees now, I'm just curious to know, in my own personal situation, I mean, I maintain my own trees.
Yeah, like I said, if it's, I mean, is it in the right-of-way? Or
I
is
don't
it?
know.
I mean, that
assume
would
not.
just be, once again, some of those older subdivisions, none of this, this doesn't apply, because it's the trees, they may overhang in the right-of-way or along a power easement or some type of that, and they're being maintained in that form or fashion. But this would actually be taking care of trees, like, for example, if a tree was dead. There's 2 dead trees, I don't know if they've been removed yet, right outside of Broadmoor. Those are within the right-of-way, DOT's removing those. So that's where that authority kind of comes in.
Did you say trees that are, I don't know whether they're in the right of way, but they overhang the street?
So if they overhang, I'm not going to say it's a gray area. In short, if they're impeding driver visibility or a threat to fall, something like that, either the village or DOT, depending on who maintains those roads, would potentially address. But I want to say what the ordinance states is that if the tree's planted on your property, like on your property outside of the right-of-way, but then is hanging in or creating that, you are responsible as the private property owner to maintain that tree.
Everything on my property is natural.
Yeah.
So,
Text. I think Forester is spelled incorrectly.
Sweet. I'm terrible at spelling.
Just so you.
No, like I said, this is not the recommended text, but I'll make a note of that and get that fixed.
I have a question about, or was it? Under the background information, it says to comply, says add enforcement and appeals provisions. But if we're talking about trees in public right-of-way, what kind of enforcement and appeals would there be?
This was pulled so the Arbor Day Foundation has sample ordinances. It's kind of unclear because, once again, it's a national foundation. So I would have to, once again, that's why this is not a final draft, because I got to get some clarification. I wanted to get some of this stuff draft so I can get it. That's why I don't want you guys to recommend anything tonight. So I can get it back to our coordinator, get the feedback, making sure that these proposed changes are meeting what his recommendations are. That's just a thing that, based off of my research with the sample ordinances from the Arbor Day Foundation, they have in there. Depending on how we do the text, in my opinion, that's already somewhat covered, because you have zoning. The appeals of zoning administrative, the appeals of the zoning administrator's decision already outlined in the NDO, and so it'd be it fall under that to an extent.
Okay.
Can you scroll down just a little bit? So once again, these are just outlining kind of what the proposed changes are. So the third change would be then adding a section for public tree plantings and care standards. Basically just putting language in there that the maintenance and removal of public trees shall conform to the ANSI A300 standards. That's already in Article 11, trying to mirror it in 93 and make it clear. Those inserts is basically, once again, what we then designate as in yellow up there, in the proposed change number 2. Like, who is that person responsible, or how do we word that? We do have a public works department, so it could be directly them, their designee, or we can keep it simple and put the manager and their designee, because that then covers pretty much anybody. So I'm going to get clarification on that from the coordinator and also run that by the attorney before I put what staff is responsible for the maintenance portion of that. Go down a little bit. All right, so then these proposed articles or proposed changes would then be to the MDO. So we would add specific definitions to Article 3, just defining public tree advisory board, basically stating that the PRNG is the tree advisory board. We'd add a definition for the village arborist and basically put the Union County Urban Forester, as well as some definitions for those ANSI A300 standards. And then we'd also then amend Article 11, and this may not occur if we do it where we take everything out of Article 11 and leave it for development and move this to Chapter 93. I just have this in there for the time being until I get some further clarification and guidance on that. I know I just threw a lot at you. Are we following? Okay. So, in short, really the one feedback I wanted is like, I was thinking PRNG, if planning board wants that duty and responsibility, they can have it. But I was,
It makes sense for people. Park and Recs.
I agree. I'm just saying that it's even recommended that we don't establish a brand-new board to use an existing, appointed committee and give them these duties. So that's one feedback I wanted. But is there any other kind of questions on the public tree side of this?
Well, I was going to ask you a question about the ANSI, the 3000.
Mhm.
Is that a standard that the arborists are familiar with? So it's not something that's, you need to become a subject matter expert on, but we rely on them for that?
Yes, they should be. If they're, it's my understanding if they're certified, I mean, this is like their Bible.
Okay.
And what Article 11 currently states, if I have it in front of me, it states, hold on. Because I want to make sure this is clear. Bear with me. So Article 11 already has, for example, it says, this is 11.13 is public trees and trees interfering with public space maintenance and protection. So this would be a section that we would either amend to just be our public trees section, and this is in the MDO. But it pretty much states that any planting or removal, that it must follow these standards. The problem is that it just states that it doesn't really kind of define that, and that's what some of these amendments would be kind of to mirror what those standards are directly in our ordinance. Also in our engineer and procedures manual, there's a few technical sheets that show like the engineered standard for tree planting, like what you're supposed to do, and this is what, once again, developers are using for subdivision. It's kind of adding that additional layer there as well, would be the intent.
And if they update, if we refer to it and they update those standards based on best practices, we're not having to rewrite.
Yeah, for the most part. But it also, like I said, it's further clarifying what those standards are right in our ordinance. All right, any other questions?
I just have a random question about, were you about to say something, Ken?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's right. It says we must conform to the standards, but if the standards change, we'd have to amend our rules. It's not, we're not incorporating their standards by reference. No, is
We're
that-
doing it, we're honestly, what it was recommended is it's almost do a mixture of both. So I have the email from our coordinator and said, I'd recommend pulling together the portions of the current ordinance that govern public trees into one document, updating the tree care standards of the public trees to the ANSI A300 standards. And so it'd be clarifying, or like I said, going into what those standards are, but still referencing the best managed practice and stuff like that. So it kind of, in my opinion, it gives us flexibility. So if those standards do update, we can still reference them and go from there.
Yeah, clarify that with your attorney, because I don't think it works that way. I think today's standards are the standards, and then you adopt an ordinance to conform to those standards, but they can change their standards tomorrow to do anything. That doesn't mean you're now bound by the new standards.
Correct,
You
and so-
you have to adopt and modify.
So with the Tree City USA accreditation, it's an annual thing. Once we get it, we have to resubmit each year. And so that would be the time where if it's updated, we would potentially we'd be right here having the same conversation and probably updating our ordinances to conform or be consistent with that.
I just want to be clear, it doesn't happen automatically. You have to do that every year.
All right, any other questions on this? Okay, so what we'll do is I just wanted to make sure you guys were aware, so this is gonna come back to you guys in November with, you know, your typical, like, hey, what's being added, changed, the official language. We would ask for you guys to make that recommendation, so then it can be considered and adopted by council at the December meeting, where then it's in effect, and I can wrap up our application and submit for our accreditation. Do we want to talk tree, is there any questions in general about Chapter 93 or Article 11 regarding like development and private property and all that lovely jazz? Okay, what you got?
Yes. So, you know where I'm going with this. I haven't reviewed the current article, so just forgive me if I'm misspeaking slightly. Just any language that asks, I know we cannot demand since it's private property, but asks property owners when they're developing their property to leave as much of the natural border as possible. But if we had more control over, if someone clear cuts their lot and they're not supposed to, that trees get put back where they were taken from. So
This is stuff that I am working on with Keith. Article 11 has, let's see. So basically it says, 11.23 says removal of regulated trees. It says no regulated tree shall be removed without first acquiring a permit. Failure to do this shall be a violation of this chapter and shall be subject to penalty provisions 11.18. 11.18 then gets into which we do have the appeal language in there already. But basically it says removal and damage of individual trees either after permit approval or not. There's fines and penalties. And then there is a reforestation, meaning that they have to replant. So, and this is all in 11.18 of the MDO. But there's a table, and it basically says that if the tree is between 4 and 11.9 inches in diameter at deemed breast height, then there's a maximum civil penalty and then reforestation. And it says 4 inches in minimum to be planted. And it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 trees. So the larger the tree that's removed, the more that you have to plant back. So that is outlined in there. Once again, what's hard is, and we've had this happen, is that a property owner, individual property owner, cuts down all the trees on their property, didn't get a permit. We go out there and they've also removed the stumps. So how do we tell what size the trees were? How do we tell what condition they were in? And this is kind of, these are the conversations I've had with Keith, and Keith is right there with me. He's like, it's a gray area, and that's where we're trying to tiptoe on like what we can enforce in private property rights. That's the other thing is
there a way to do, so for heavily forested acreage or potential development, like lots that are gonna be developed, is there a way to request not a tree mitigate, you know, when
a tree survey?
A tree survey?
Yes.
Because I know certain people have had tree surveys, and that's how we know how many canopy trees were taken down.
Yep. So there was another instance, and once again, I'm not getting into the specifics, but Chapter 93 technically says that you are exempt from that chapter if your lot was platted prior to October something 2003. Yep, I know. That's once again. My understanding is at that time that we adopted that chapter, that is what the attorney was recommending, is that you can't hold. It's kind of, that's where it's tiptoeing that private property, because once again, it's focusing on development to an extent. That's where, in my opinion, the way our tree removal permit has been enforced over the last, 10, 15 years has been, like I said, a gray area. It works, and we at least like have a conversation with these property owners, but that further enforcement is still where we're working on.
I don't understand why we couldn't push that back.
I agree.
The properties that have been platted before 2003 are and clear cut.
If it's, hold on, yes, but if they're doing it for a subdivision, then that is a new plat.
That's a different thing. Yeah, it's a different thing. I'm talking about like individual lots, especially rural residential, where people go in, they build one or two houses, they clear cut, and
So,
now they're not held to the,
nope, so what, then that's where, this is where I try to get creative in how we enforce this. So Article 11 states, if you are disturbing over 10,000 square feet, i.e. pretty much you're clearing a certain portion of land to build a house, you have to have a tree removal permit. Now, that's where then Article 11 kind of lacks mitigation to an extent because, sorry, it doesn't lack it, it's kind of unclear because then it says, like, let's say if you have a 5-acre tract and you're removing, 15,000 square feet area of trees. Let's just say that's or let's just say they do a tree survey and that's 20 canopy trees. Like I said, I'm focusing on canopy here because that's what we're enforcing. Then Article 11 states that if you have an area that's being preserved on your property, then it can kind of offset. If you don't, like, it's kind of confusing. And once again, this is stuff I'm working on with Keith. We've been working on this for the last 3 to 4 months. He's just been traveling and busy. Whereas Chapter 93 has kind of a clear, hey, if you're removing X amount of trees, you got to replant with X amount of trees. So that's kind of the stuff that we're trying to bridge that gap on a development/private property standpoint. We do have, like I said, we have ways to enforce it, to at least double check or at least get somebody to call and say, hey, do I need a tree removal permit? And most of the time I'm gonna say yes. Where then it further then gives us a chance to review and ask why they're doing this, or are there ways to preserve certain species of trees? Because that's another kind of misconception sometimes is that you may see a wooded lot, but how many are actually defined as canopy per our ordinance? And how many are actually in good condition? Because some of them can be dead. We have, there's been some developments, like I said, that they've showed on their tree survey that they're protecting, and Keith's like, this tree's dead or it's gonna die, so he would rather have it removed where they have to mitigate it type thing. So there's a lot of different variables there that the goal is once again, they contact the village asking what they need to do. We give them what the regulations are, at least get them, like, I've had HOAs or property owners pull tree removal permits for dead trees before. I don't charge the fee, I waive the fee, but at least it documents it. And, provides them like, okay, hey, yes, they reached out, we know what's being removed. So then if they remove other trees, that's a violation. And at the same time, if their neighbor calls, hey, no, that tree's dead, I've got it documented from an arborist or a tree care company or something that has a report that shows that it's dead, and it's authorized to be removed, and they don't have to, it's gonna always consider mitigation on dead trees.
well, so, the other thing, and I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, but like when you're removing tree canopy, when you're removing trees that are tree canopy trees, okay, you know what I mean? To clear cut a lot because it's easier for the builder. You're not just affecting the canopy, you're also affecting the trees that survive under the canopy. So like, just if you take that away, you could be affecting a whole nother set of trees that are used to living under the canopy, that can only really survive under tree canopy. So it's like, I don't know, I just don't think there's enough there, especially for those rural residential lots that,
Well, and that's, like I said, that's where,
this is where the character of Marvin is too, along all the, you know what I mean?
no, I agree. And trust me, I have talked with other municipalities on this. I've, talked with Keith on this, and yes, we have very good protections in place. The thing is I don't think you can be perfect in this sense on top of like those further protections that, some residents want, or kind of maybe what you're getting to when it comes to that individual private property rights is gray. And that's, once again, what we're trying to work through right now. But when it comes down to any type of development, for the most part, any zoning permit, our zoning permit has a section on there that says, are you removing trees? If they mark no, for example, we've done this plenty of times, and we go and pull the GIS, and they're building a pool, and that back of yard is fully wooded, we send an email saying, hey, you marked this, but we definitely can note that there's at least some type of trees being removed. And, you know, most of the time, especially with pools, because there's landscape and screening standards, they can remove them and they're mitigated. But once again, we can't say you can't cut down a tree because you want to better your property or you want to develop your property. And that's where I feel like I said, I think that's sometimes some of the misconception.
Well, I'm not saying, I mean, there's a difference between clear cutting and, you know.
Yeah.
There's a reasonable, you know, but I just don't feel like people are, they're just not even caring, they're just.
And like I said, trust me, I've had plenty of conversation with certain property owners that they just moved to Marvin and they want to cut down trees because once again, they want more lawn space. And I've had conversations with Keith, and Keith is like, they bought the wrong lot. And I'm like, yeah, that's 100% accurate. But that's where, like I said, we go out and meet with them, we walk the property, we try to get an understanding of what they're doing. And there's been times like we denied tree removal permits because they're saying they're gonna build a pool. Okay, wait till you build the pool. But, you know, it just takes a little pushback sometimes, and the goal is to work with them and work with them from the sense of, once again, educating them what our ordinance states and get a clear understanding of what they're trying to achieve, because that's the other thing. Somebody might wanna develop a lot, but realize they don't need to cut down all the trees. There's ways that you can still preserve, you know, some of the boundary or perimeter. And we did this with like the sage at Marvin and all that, like with their individual lots, like on what trees actually need to be removed versus not, and what can be protected during that development phase. Because it's hard because certain larger canopy trees have a larger critical root zone. If you got to grade the lot for stormwater conveyance or, you know, utility installation, you may impact that critical root zone, even though it can be out of the parameter of what's being disturbed further. You're taking a chance to damage that tree long-term. Prime example is the tree right in front of the Marvin Grove property. When the roundabout was constructed and they built up that ditch, and this has nothing to do with the developer, this was DOT and back in the day, that tree was damaged. That tree is dead or dying. And it's stuff like that where that's what the village does during their review of, one, what trees are being protected, can they actually be protected, and same vice versa, what trees are being removed and do they have to be removed? And if they are, what are they planting back?
Well, maybe it's something that we could even look at with the new land use plan development is, you know, those major Marvin corridors. And what are we doing specifically to preserve trees along those major thoroughfares that kind of give Marvin its identity? I don't know if there's a way to add a little bit more protection there or what, but.
Trust me, we're exploring all those options, and this is everything, like I said, we're working on. It's just, these are sometimes things that, from a staff standpoint, when an application's submitted or other projects, this stuff gets on the back burner just because it's being staff initiated, and we do find it as a priority. And it's like with this whole Tree City USA accreditation. This is something that has been a goal of mine for the village since I started here. It's just taken 4 years because the time, commitment, the staffing to meet all those parameters and get the ordinances updated, all that stuff. And, you know, we're finally there. We've already crossed off a couple standards, and I'm not going to let us miss this opportunity to apply this year, and that's why I'm trying to get these ordinances updated prior to December.
I hope, so land use people, we need to, if the trees were cut down on Queens Road, it would no longer be Queens Road. You know what I mean? Like, there are certain places that are identifiable because of the trees,
And that's what,
we want to keep that.
but Queens Road, they're in the right of way, aren't they? I'm pretty sure.
Some of them are
So that's where,
so huge,
but if they're in the right of way, they are protected through Charlotte's public tree ordinance. And that's what we're trying to achieve. And that's where, like I said, it's a difference of how we used to do it in the old ordinance, saying street trees are trees that are in your front yard and private property, but we define them as street trees when that's not defined as a street tree in any other ordinance. Street trees is what's along the street that gives that shade and canopy cover over the street over time. and they're public trees. And those public trees are then protected through strengthening our public tree ordinance. So, any other questions?
About, did we need to talk about gates?
I've got that on there. We've done some research. Once again, this is something that the tree ordinance and regulations took priority. We're still working on that. Potentially in November, we'll bring you back a draft. I'm not gonna have you guys probably recommend that at the November meeting, because I want to keep that separate from the tree when it goes to council. But we have done some more research, looked at some additional municipalities and what they regulate. Gated subdivision is tricky, and we'll just have to see if that's something that the planning board wants to, like I said, add those regulations in, or do we kind of stay with what our current says?
Is that same with a maximum lot coverage?
No, we're definitely going to be updating, and at least clarifying that, but
Like for this next,
yeah. Well, yes, I will have some draft language for that specifically, but I'm not going to have you guys recommend that with the tree, if that makes sense.
got it, yep. All right. Do you have a planner's report?
Yeah, I got 3 items. So comp plan update. Village, like I said, we entered in contract with Kimley Horn to do the comprehensive plan, as well as updates to our 2020 Greenway Parks and Greenway Master Plan. We had our kickoff meeting 2 weeks ago with them, or staff did. We met pretty much all afternoon. I drove them around Marvin, showed them every neighborhood, gave them every background on what I know about them. Told, so, very informative. They trying to learn and make sure they, know the character and everything here. And they're kind of in that initial data collection and getting all the information stage. The next kind of steps of that is that we're going to have a working committee. I mentioned this, working group. That's volunteered, and 3 of you guys volunteered at the last meeting, and I appreciate that. So we'll have our first working group meeting probably sometime in November. Kimley Horn will also they'll be doing a pop-up event, maybe at our tree lighting. But it's kind of one of their public engagement forums where it's not, how do I say this? A pop-up event is basically where they go to an event that's a village event, but it's not catered directly to like doing a public engagement for the comprehensive plan, if that makes sense. But it gives an opportunity for the residents that go to that event that maybe don't know about it or want to learn about it, or even if you don't want to go to that event, but you want to go give your input, it kills 2 birds with 1 stone. And so, like I said, I'm not 100% sure what event. It's not going to be a surprise, to my knowledge. But with the trick or treat in the park on Friday, that was something that we originally discussed, but I think it was too quick of a turnaround. So we're looking at potentially tree lighting. But whenever we get that confirmed, we'll make sure that that's advertised and mentioned. And but yeah, the goal is to probably have a good draft done in February for your guys' joint meeting. But it's a good opportunity. It's something that's needed, and we're excited about it. So, other than that, I've already mentioned Arbor Day. Please come. It's gonna be fun. And I haven't looked at the weather, but somebody please don't tell me it's gonna rain.
It's supposed to be a nice weekend.
Okay, it's supposed to be nice.
This weekend, Saturday, you said?
Yeah, good. I was about to say, I haven't looked at the weather, so that's great. Last thing is just, some general development updates. The Marvin Commons development has submitted their construction plans. Staff's in the process of reviewing. Myself and the village engineer has completed our first review and provided those comments back to the developer. Per the MDO, that will come to you guys for like courtesy review. If you guys recall, under the old ordinance, it came to you guys and you guys made a recommendation with the council and all that. That's all an administrative task, but we still have it coming to you. So that'll be something that, as they get these comments addressed and kind of with that final version that's pretty much good by staff, we'll bring that. So that will be potentially maybe at the November meeting. If not, we're not going to have a December meeting, hopefully. So maybe January, but they have submitted, so we begin our review on that. And I know they submitted to outside agencies with DOT, DEQ, and all that. Other than that, that's all I got. Oh, Austin's got 2 things.
We are currently implementing a new version of eScribe, the software that you guys use for your agenda packets. Not much is going to change, but things are going to probably look a little different. It might be relabeled. I'm working on the implementation now, but if it seems to be significant enough to warrant additional training, I will set up time with you guys either before the holidays or in January. Other thing, community survey is still going on. Will be up and running until the day after Thanksgiving. Results are coming in. We're at, as of yesterday, we were at 279. So we're already 2/3 of the way to where we were originally. I've got high turnout in a couple neighborhoods: Weddington Chase, Marvin Creek, Firethorn, Canterfield, Preserve. Those are pretty good. Everywhere else needs more.
I didn't even see it. My husband filled it out, sent it in, I hadn't even seen it. I didn't even get to say it.
That is a spousal talk for later.
So, yeah.
I'll make sure it's in the minutes.
There was an informational flyer that has gone out. You should have received it by now. Okay, good, good.
Got it yesterday.
And it did have another copy of everyone's code on it. So if you missed your first postcard or you threw it away, you had another chance to get it there. At this point, if you don't have the flyer, you don't have the postcard, you don't know if you threw it away, you don't know if you didn't receive it, we're telling everyone to contact Centralina directly at info@centralina.org to get their code directly. You still have plenty of time to do the survey. If you're like me, you can do it in one sitting. But there's still plenty of time to do it. We're encouraging everyone to do it when we hope to have a really good turnout. And I'll have another update for you guys next month on how it's
I
going.
would like 100% participation from the planning board.
Please go.
Or planning board
Please
spouses.
tell all your friends to go take the survey.
Already done.
I want to get 1,000.
I'm all for it. Make it happen.
1,000
Same thing I got.
at least.
That would be a good pool.
It really would.
We did buy some yard signs that we're going to put along the trails for people who walk. They have QR codes just for them to go do the survey. Just a little something extra. We had a little extra money from the marketing budget for the project. So those will be going out probably in the next week or so. So good.
Cool. Well, good luck. I'm sure it was good.
You did.
No, I mean,
Well, no, you
no,
didn't.
fine.
Yeah.
All right, so we don't have any action items, correct?
No.
All right. So board member comments? John?
Staff, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rich.
Sunny and 63 on Saturday.
No excuses not to come out.
No
Soccer
excuses.
games. I might be able to, can I come for the beginning?
Yeah.
Yes, the tree will be planted there, so you can come and visit it anytime you'd like. Park is open from 8 to 8.
Information.
We'll have some of those printouts like available here at Village Hall if you aren't able to come to the event, but please try.
I need to do a Lorax read aloud. I'll bring my books.
I'd like to wish our fellow planning board member, Ken
Yes.
Marino, happy birthday.
Beat me
Kim
to it.
Marino.
Oh, happy birthday.
Retirement.
And Rich, a happy retirement. There.
Happy
Thank you very
retirement.
much.
There you go.
When's your
Nice.
birthday, Ken?
And also wish our 2
Oh,
planning
it is
board
today.
members, this is the last planning board before the election. I appreciate you
Thank you.
running.
And good luck.
Wish you,
Thank you.
Marcus, very good luck.
Fingers
Good luck to you
crossed.
both.
Thank you. Thank you. So I just wanted to ask, do you know if it's a boy or a girl?
We are having a girl.
Oh,
So,
yay!
Yep.
That's
So we're-
his
we're-
preference for pink, so, you know.
There
Yeah,
you go.
we're excited. And we went today for the anatomy scan. All is good. So, like I said, she may kill me because we've told everybody for the most part, but we haven't done like a public formal announcement. So here it is. But yeah, yeah,
It is the best thing you will ever do.
I appreciate it. Yep. We're excited and just, like I said, she's in this weird phase where, well, not weird phase. She's in the second trimester where she's feeling good, she's feeling normal, and sometimes she forgets, like, is she really pregnant or not? So,
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to forget. Well,
Before we adjourn, there's one more thing.
one more thing, oh Lord.
So I will be leaving soon, unfortunately, but I wanted to take this time to thank everyone on this board. The planning board was my first ever meeting, and you guys have all been very welcoming to me and treated me very nicely. So thank you guys for everything, and I can't wait to take everything I've learned here and spread it all over the world.
Wish you the
Can you
best.
share us what you're doing?
So my partner and I have been dating for 4 years now, and we've been doing long distance for 3 years. Danny, if you're watching this. And I'm moving up to him in Jersey City, New Jersey, which is called the City of Jersey City officially.
And everything is legal in Jersey.
Most things. Though I did see, interestingly enough, in the Hoboken ordinance, if you leave out dog poop and someone figures out it's you, you will be fined and your face will be printed in the newsletter. Isn't that interesting?
As it should.
Public shaming.
That sounds like a toxic HOA right there.
But I could be here at the next planning board meeting, but just in case I'm not, I wanted to thank everybody so much for all of your time here. You guys are what makes Marvin great, so thank you guys so much.
We are going to miss you.
I tried to threaten her not to leave, it didn't work.
No, and you're a lot cuter than those two schmucks over there, so.
My job has been posted, so if anybody wants it,
If you're a
they're
unicorn-
great bosses.
If you're a unicorn, please apply.
Thanks, guys.
That's great. Not for us, but for you. I'm not bitter.
It's a win-lose, for sure.
All right, yes, I'm gonna let Michael vote. You ready to vote?
I'm moved to adjourn.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Madam Chair.